Romans chapter 6 is where I've had you turn. And I'm going to show you some verses in that as we come through the Bible study. But tonight I want to start with the brain. We study the brain quite a bit in psychology. The Bible doesn't mention that word brain. But it's obviously something that God has created in us, and it's a marvelous organ. It's such a thing to just know what goes on in your brain all the time, and it's only about so big. It's not very big. One time I told my psychology class, if you took your brain, I wouldn't suggest to them that they do this, but if they took their brain and they took a hot iron and they spread it out with a hot iron, it would be about the size of a full sheet newspaper. And then I would take a piece of paper and just crumble it up into the size of about a brain and say, now God's crammed that all in your head right there. But that's how much information it has. And you have the frontal lobes and the back lobes and all the things that go in. You got part of you works on this side and part of you works on this side. And if you ever want to see how that works, and I do this psychology class too, you do this and then you ask them to move one of your fingers and you point at it, but you don't touch it. And it's almost impossible to do because your right brain works your left brain, and now you've just messed your brain up. And so you point at that, and you'll see kids do this. So you do it too if you don't practice. You'll point to that middle left finger, and they'll move this one or that one, and then they're trying to, how come I can't move it? Because the right brain moves the left brain. See how hard it is? You move the wrong one. It's just the left brain and the right brain doing that. So the brain is the least trustworthy organ you have in your body because it can be affected by so many things. Let me give you some examples. See if this won't mess your brain up. How about if you don't sleep for 24 hours? Or 48? Paul, when he was in Hell Week, I use that because the Navy does. It's not really Hell Week, but you understand what I'm talking about. So he was in the last day of that. He'd slept for 48 hours. In 168 hours, he'd slept about 48. 2 days, 2 nights. He hadn't slept 48, excuse me. He'd slept about 10 hours in 168 hours. And he said the last thing they have to do is go all the way around Coronado Island, which is a 12-mile canoe, for lack of a better term. It's a paddle boat trip all the way around Coronado Island. It takes them 12 hours to go the entire length around the island. And of course, they're sleep deprived, purposely sleep deprived. And Paul said, Dad, as I was going this and we're doing he said, suddenly I'm rowing in sand. It's sand everywhere. And I'm wondering, what in the world are we doing on the beach sowing in sand? So what was he doing? The brain wasn't working. He was beginning to hallucinate, which can happen. When I was in the hospital and they had me on medications, I had a nurse come in and I said, look over there, there's 3 Army men right there in that garbage bag right there. And she said, really? I said, yeah, don't you see them? You take marijuana, alcohol. I've been dealing with that. Alcohol. Not for myself, in case you're watching. Alcohol, cocaine, heroin, pills, and sometimes it's medication, morphine. You know, they'll tell me now conversations they had with me when I was in the hospital. I don't remember it. Don't remember it. And I'm active for a month. You may have come see me. Like, okay, I don't remember that. Or you had a conversation. I've had people tell me conversations I've had. I've talked to people for 2 hours on the phone while I'm in that state, and I don't remember the conversation. That's true of alcoholics too. So what's going on with this? You put the wrong ingredient in that, and it could be something simple like a Red Bull, caffeine. Too much caffeine will just make that brain go. So it isn't really trustworthy. Now, the reason I say that is because the theory of evolution is based all on that. Right? It's them thinking, how did this all come about? How did this all come to be? Now, we don't trust the brain. We trust a book. Now, here's the thing. If you're going to risk your eternity on this, then it had better be perfect. It had better not be able to be manipulated into thinking things you don't think are true. We could get you in such a state with your brain that I could convince you that my shirt's red. Just the case. So if you take this brain and you elevate it and say, well, that's my God, then God will get you in a point where you will be thinking wrong things, and you'll just be gone down a path. I tell you in the last time, 2 Thessalonians chapter 2 says that God will send strong delusion that they will believe a lie because they receive not the truth. 2 Thessalonians 2:12, I believe. So the second thing is, so we don't trust this brain. Now we're thankful for it because it's an amazing mechanism. I'm speaking right now and making a sentence because I am using my brain. I'm in the process of one of the goofiest things I've ever done. I'm trying to learn Spanish. And I am spending several hours a week trying to learn Spanish. And I've begun where I can read it pretty good. Not anything, I mean, it's like, remember first grade reader? Run, Jack, run. It's that level. But I'm beginning to get it, and it is straining my brain to try to learn a foreign language. It's something I've always wanted to do, and I thought, well, Spanish is the best thing to do since I live around here. But I can't trust that brain. You will remember something that never happened because you will conflate one memory with another. You know who the most untrustworthy witness in a courtroom is? An eyewitness. Because you and I can see the same event take place, and every one of us will have an opinion of what we saw. And you can't trust. You can break down a witness and say, well, you said this in the deposition. Do you remember saying that? I don't remember. Well, do I need to read the deposition to you? They read the deposition. They go, well, I guess I said it. You can't trust that thing because it isn't perfect. And if you trust anything from this as far as your eternity goes, you have no security in your eternity. So if you're going to trust a book for your eternity, then I'm telling you, friends, that book had better be infallible. It had better be perfect. It had better be so trustworthy that you're going to put your everlasting soul on it and rest and say, okay, here's where I stand. Now, which one are you going to choose? You're going to choose the brain, you're going to trust the book. And we're going to trust the book. An evolutionist will trust their brains, their science, which is always changing. That's the thing about science. You just heard new evidence, new data, new things about COVID that they didn't tell you 2 years ago. I'm not going to get into that. I'll get kicked off Facebook. But the point is, you can't trust the brain. The brain will get you every time. So we trust that book. Now, I'm not mocking the brain. I'm thankful we have it. I'm glad I'm not like, I think it was the Scarecrow in The Wizard of Oz. If I only had a brain. I'm glad we've got brains, but they're not trustworthy enough to put your senses in. So our brains break down in task performance. It's really something what God's done with us. Our brains don't fully develop till we're 25 for most people. So you have to remember that when you're dealing with teenagers. They're sort of half-witted. And I say that with kindness. I pick on Laura now, she's 13, and from time to time I'll just go, and she'll go, what are you doing? Well, I'm trying to talk teenager. Because you just can't, they just have their own language. And we have conversations about that, like the word like. I'm like 13 years old. What do you mean you're like 13 years old? You're either 13 years old or you're not. Well, Grandpa, you just don't get it. And so we'll text, and she says, Grandpa, why do you always type out all the words? It's just a thing with me. I'll never use you. It's just that brain. So you get to 25, it's full capacity and it's working fully, but then about 45, it starts to go down. And you get up to where I am, you begin to forget things. And you just pray, man, I just cannot remember that name. I was laying in bed the other night, and I know this guy's name as well as I know my own name, but I couldn't remember it. And I'm going, oh God, I hope I'm not getting dementia. It finally came to me. But it just happens with the brain. The brain gets less and less capacity. That's why I'm trying to learn Spanish. Try to keep it working, just to keep it going. Thank God, here's a lady nearly 90 years old, and look at her brain. It's still functioning. My mom at 93 is still functioning. And there's people, Pat Summit at 60, began to lose her capacity. So you just have to understand you can't trust that brain. So we trust the book and not the brain. Now let's take this part right here. These two little statements are fascinating. They're not Vespie. I didn't come up with this. I'm not that smart. But this is brilliant. Law without liberty is bondage. Okay, take that in. Because if you have laws, but you don't have any liberty. Hitler had lots of laws, but there was no liberty. China has lots of laws, but there's no liberty. And so one of the tenets of the United States, I think Thomas Jefferson wrote it, that we cannot take life, liberty, or property without due process. And that simply means they just can't come in. At least they shouldn't be able to. They should not be able to come in and just raid your home and take everything you've got without due process. That means a court seeing it and giving credence to it and all of that. So law without liberty is bondage. And we have those 10 amendments to the Constitution, the Bill of Rights, which guarantee some of those rights. If those rights are taken away, then you're more in bondage than you are liberty. Right? Everybody agree? That's not politics, that's just truth. It doesn't matter who does it. It doesn't matter if it's a Democrat or Republican or what do they call them? What they used to call them? Somebody used to tell them, what is it? Mugwumps. I don't know how you knew what I'm thinking. She wasn't even here Sunday. Mugwumps. Law without liberty is bondage. But then look at this. Liberty without law is anarchy. So you've got to have liberty. Liberty's the key. Freedom's the key. And the one thing that makes our nation unique is we were founded on liberty. That's why we wanted to get away from George. King George, because he was giving us laws without liberty. But then you got to be careful. If you have liberty without law, then you have the French Revolution. And they set up did you know the French Revolution took place near the American Revolution? Most people don't know that, but there's pretty parallel in time. A little later for the French Revolution. But the French Revolution, it was just a disaster. It was mob rule. They set up the guillotine, and they were cutting people's heads off left and right. If you didn't agree, you got killed. But the American Revolutions established pretty quickly some laws, adopted laws even from the English law. A lot of our laws based upon English law. But if you don't have liberty, you don't really have life. At least freedom to live as you would. So what did God do? God set up this thing where he gave you freedom. One of the first things he did with every being he created, at least that I can determine, it's the cherubim. If I go down the list of God's creation, the cherubim are the highest created beings as far as power, There's 4 of them in Revelation chapter 4, Ezekiel chapter 10, Ezekiel chapter 1. There's a few other places they're mentioned. There's one cherub missing. I've taught you that. That one cherub missing was Lucifer, who fell and became Satan, the devil, the Leviathan. He's mentioned in Isaiah 27, Psalm 41. And then below that you have some seraphim. They're mentioned in Isaiah chapter 6. They have 6 wings. The cherubim have wings. And then you have the angels, archangels. Let's go there first. Archangels. There's only one archangel named in the Bible, and that's Michael. Daniel chapter 12, Jude chapter 1, Michael. He's the prince for Israel. But there are other angels that are mighty angels. That's mentioned in the Bible, mighty angels. Gabriel is mentioned. Some people say he's an archangel, and he may be, but the Bible doesn't say that. And then you go down the list. Angels, a normal angel? What's a normal angel? I may do a study on angels. That's been on my heart recently. Maybe do an angel study after this. But angels, one angel killed 185,000 men over there in Kings. And so you don't want to mess around with one of them. And what God did with all of them that I can tell, the cherubim, one of them had free will, he broke. The angels had free will, a third of them leave. So 2/3 there and a third left. So God gives freedom, and he certainly gave freedom to mankind, to Adam and Eve in the Garden of Eden. And what's freedom? Freedom's the opportunity to make a choice. So you choose. Adam and Eve, as we know, chose to do wrong. They chose to sin. It was a personal choice for each one of them. Eve did not make Adam sin. Adam did not make Eve sin. God did not make Eve sin. The devil did not make Eve sin. Eve chose to sin on her own. Flip Wilson used to have this thing. Remember Flip Wilson, the old comedian? It was the devil made me do it. And there may be some cases where you just have the devil on you and wears you out, and he does wear us out. But I can't blame the devil for all my sins. Some of it's all on me. Choices I made. Can you agree? We're not going to blame the devil for everything, because we have the right to choose. Now, once you make a choice, it becomes a habit. It can be a good habit. It can be a bad habit. You have a habit of reading your Bible every day. That's a good habit. You're making that choice. Nobody's making you read your Bible, and nobody's making you pray, but nobody's making you watch pornography. You have a choice. And once it becomes a habit, then you get in bondage to it. And once you get in bondage, the Japanese have this old proverb. It goes like this. Man takes drink. Talking about alcohol. Man takes drink. Drink takes drink. Drink takes man. How did it all start? The man chose to drink. And pretty soon he's in bondage. Or the alcoholic says, I can't stop. And that's been said to me. I can't stop. Bondage. Can't break those bands of wickedness that just wrap you up. Who at 21 says, I wish I had never taken my first drink, because it gets you. But let's just not highlight the alcoholic. Any of us, if we aren't careful, will become bondage to sin. Any sin. Now, some of them are more public, and some of them are more egregious from the standpoint that they will eventually kill you. All sin kills us, but some sins will hasten your departure. Let's put it that way. Look at Romans chapter 6. Let me show you what the Bible says here. Romans 6. Let's start in verse 16. That's a good place to start. Know ye not that to whom ye yield yourselves servants to obey, his servants ye are to whom you obey. Yield yourselves. That's a choice. When you come up to an intersection and you see yield, what do? You give way to the other person. Another person's coming, they have the right of way. You yield. So God says here, whoever you yield yourselves to, that's who you are a servant to. Okay? You can yield to sin. Isn't that why? Whether of sin unto death. Or you can yield to obedience unto righteousness. But God be thanked that ye were the servants of sin, but ye have obeyed from the heart that form of doctrine which was delivered to you. Being then made free from sin, you become the servants of righteousness. So God says in that great chapter, and that's all about our relationship with Jesus Christ now on this earth. In our daily living, we make choices every day of whether or not we're going to be a servant of sin or a servant of bondage. But the point is, you're going to be a servant to something, a slave. You're going to be a servant to something. You're either going to serve God or you're going to serve the flesh. Every day, every choice. Take the upward path, upward way, every day. And don't take the downward path, which leads to destruction and death. But if you take away this, and this is the key to what God has done, if you take this away where you don't have any freedom, then all you have is a machine, a robot that has no choice. And God did not want that in his creation. So God created you with a free will. Now you say, what does this have to do with creation and evolution? In creation and evolution, there's no freedom. Think about it. You just were. If we go through the process, then something came from nothing. And living matter was made out of non-living matter. Remember that from last time? So if that's all true, then you really didn't. You were just a person of chance. It's all chance. If that leads us. And you've got to get rid of that. And if you get rid of that, then look at what you're left with. Anarchy. One of the greatest tenets and practicers of evolution. What does evolution believe? The survival of the fittest. So the two greatest persons, but let's just stay with one. The greatest tenet of evolution was Adolf Hitler. And Adolf Hitler believed and practiced evolution. That's the end of evolution. If evolution is the strong survive and the weak are destroyed, that's exactly what he did. He starved the Jews to death. He put them in gas chambers, and he was bent on destroying them all. But God prevented him from doing that. But if you're an evolutionist, it's sort of, I know this is bad to say, but if you're an evolutionist and you really believe in evolution, then you ought to look at Hitler and go, well, he did some things horrible, but really the tenets of evolution are what he was practicing. What's that? In fact, Hitler thought Jews, the Hebrew children, were rats. He likened them to rats, to vermin that ought to be destroyed. And he saw killing the Hitlers. Now he's demon-possessed, he's nuts, he's full of the devil. I'm not justifying anything he did, I'm just telling you what he believed. And he saw it as no different of killing a Jew, a human being, a child, as no different than you catching a mouse in a mousetrap. That's how he saw it. Why did he see that? Because he was an evolutionist. And what he wanted everybody to be was blonde, blue-eyed, and strong. He called it the master race. What was that? Evolution in practice. Nobody but him's ever had the courage to do it. I guess you could say Stalin. That was the other example I was going to give. But Stalin was was much more political than Hitler was. Hitler had this idea of the Third Reich being the third 1,000 years, a 1,000-year reign. Where have you heard that before? So the Third Reich. It's going to be a 1,000-year reign with Germany as the head and your Führer. So that all Heil Hitler stuff, Heil Hitler. All that stuff was devil. There's a picture, preview, the prologue of the real Antichrist who's coming. Hitler was just a viewpoint of what's coming. So here's the problem that we have with this thing, with this. Now what I've got written up there is a little shorthanded, so let me explain it. So if you and I are going to, and science is trying to do this right now. Science is in the process of trying to duplicate a man, to clone him. A few years ago, probably 80s, remember the famous sheep over there in Norway, Netherlands, somewhere over there in Europe? Dolly, I think. How do I remember that? Dolly the sheep was the first cloned sheep. And it was just the beginning of what they're going to try to do. So if man were ever to be able to, maybe God will allow him to, I don't know what God's plans are, but if man were ever to create and duplicate a man, Xerox him, make a new one, they're way behind God. But here's what God did. God made a man without a man or a woman. What was his name? Adam. And God made a woman without a woman being involved. What was her name? Eve. And God made a man without a man involved. What was his name? Jesus Christ. And God made a man out of a man and a woman. Who's that? You. That's you. Congratulations. If you don't fall into that category, I'd like to talk to you after church. So there's God's way. God did it that way. What can this thing come up with? Dolly the sheep. So if science could create and duplicate you in such a way that your dog would be fooled if the other person walked in, and it would wag its tail and act like it's you when it's really not you, we might salute them, but you can't do this. It'll never be duplicated again, unless God does it. But He's not going to ever do that again. I don't know what other plans He has. So then the people come up with the question. I've been asked this question, I don't know how many times possible for me to enumerate. Well, what about the dinosaurs? Where did the dinosaurs come from? Preacher, do you believe in dinosaurs? I say, well, I feel strongly both ways. I love that argument. One person's arguing this, another person's arguing this, and they're completely opposite of one another. And then they say, well, what do you think? And I say, well, I feel strongly both ways. That's a wonderful way to get out of the argument. Use that sometime. You can borrow that from me. I borrowed it from somebody else. So I don't have a problem with dinosaurs being on the earth. People say, well, I got proof there was a dinosaur. Man, great. I'm happy. Or people say, I don't believe in dinosaurs. I don't believe it's possible. There's nothing in the Bible about dinosaurs. Man, that's fine. I agree. It don't make any difference. It's not going to affect my faith. I'm going to get up in the morning and try to make it through the day and live for Jesus Christ. Whether there's a dinosaur or not a dinosaur don't make any difference to me, because God could make dinosaurs and destroyed them and wiped them out. Or God could have not made dinosaurs, and it's something that scientists have made up. I've been to Washington, D.C., and I've been to the Museum of Natural Arts, and I've seen those dinosaurs, and it's a bunch of hooey to me, because it's about 90% plastic. They say, well, with carbon dating and all these DNA tests, what are you testing that with? I'm just not going to swallow it like I did when I was in the 7th and 8th grade and 9th grade. I'm just not going to swallow it anymore. And you tell me that and you say, we can prove it by carbon-14 dating. And I can say, well, by carbon-14 dating, you're nuts. Carbon-14 dating is fallacy. They say, well, we got the bone. It's big. Well, could that have been a giant? Hello? Genesis chapter 6. If you kick that out and you believe that, of course it had to be a dinosaur. You say, well, we've tested the DNA. You think I'm going to trust you? You tell me it's DNA from an animal and it's this long, it has to be Brontosaurus. Well, I'm either going to say, well, God made that. I don't have a problem with it. Or I'm going to say, you just hadn't got out of the rain yet and it's cold. You need to get you a blanket. So I'm going to go with this every time, and you are too. You just remember, you read something, you hear something, you get some brilliant guy on there who is a physicist or a biologist or a astronomist or somebody. I mean, they just got brains. They make me feel like I need to be on the special bus. They start giving that stuff, and it goes against that. I don't care how smart they are. They're a fool, according to the Bible. 1 Corinthians chapter 1. God can take the foolishness of God. Listen to this verse. The foolishness of God is wiser than men. You say, what's the foolishness of God? Right there. He said, I'll make a man without a man being involved. And they don't believe it. They reject it. They kick him out. Well, he was a man, but he was like Muhammad. And you're a blasphemer. Amen, amen, amen. Blasphemer. You elevate anyone to Jesus Christ. You're a blasphemer. Okay, I didn't mean to get preaching. So here we have the brain versus the book. That's the whole purpose of this lesson tonight. And I'm going to close tonight, as I look over this, I want to close tonight with these examples to show you just what kind of God we have. Now there's a quail. A quail lays about 12 eggs. When it lays, it has to have its nest on the ground, and it lays its eggs. And that quail mama will not sit on those eggs till all those eggs are there in the nest. So she'll lay one egg, but she won't get on that egg to sit and have it hatch. She'll wait till she's got about 12. And then when she's got 12, she'll sit down. And all 12 of those little birds are born at the same time. How does that happen? Well, I'll tell you how it happens. It's an interesting story. These little chicks, little birds inside these eggs, if one is incubating faster than the other, it'll peck the egg beside it. And if that one's developing slower, it'll hurry up. And so that happens all in that circle around all those eggs. And then they're all hatched at the same time. You tell me who did that. It just happened. It just came to be. Now I'm going to tell you why your mole is your best friend. You got moles in your yard? Quit trying to kill them. What? They make my yard look awful, but I'll tell you what they do. So God makes this mole. And I'm not saying you shouldn't catch mice, you shouldn't catch rats. Don't feel bad if you kill a mole, kill a mole. I had a little dog, rat terrier. Her name was Cindy, my favorite dog of all time. And she was a rat terrier. So you know what a rat terrier's bred to do. Rat terrier's bred to kill rats. So this little rat terrier would go around the yard and it would sniff out moles and it would get that mole and get it up. And moles can't walk very fast. They just sort of lumber around. And this little dog would catch it and then just throw it across the yard and then go get it again while it crawls away. It thinks it's going to get away and that little dog will go get it. And it just play with it as a toy till that mole just got wore out and died. So I'm not against killing moles. But that mole, let me tell you about it. Got these two little hands in the front. You seen one, right? Got these two little hands in the front. And it's got special claws on the front that are diggers. Now, they can't run very fast, but man, they can dig like a digger. You get them underground, you ever seen them? Well, behind them is a tail and legs, and they've got thousands and thousands of sensors. They've never even figured out how many they got. And what those sensors do is that mole can hear in solid dirt, feet away, a grub or a worm. And it digs. And it eats it. Now, the reason you need to be thankful for moles is that's because that's the reason why your garden is so good and your plants grow so nice. Because the grubs are enemies to your plants. You got moles in your yard, I bet you got a pretty garden. And why do you have a pretty garden? Because the mole is your friend. You want to have a pretty garden? You want to have pretty flowers? You want to have pretty crops? Get you some moles. Put them in your yard. Salute the mole when he goes by. Thank you, pal. My yard looks like it's been dug up all over the place. But I sure do have a pretty garden. And then the plant. The plants, let's just say. There are, I'm going to have to get my notes here just to make sure I give this right in case anybody knows, and you know a lot more. If you're listening, you know biology, you know a lot more about this than I do. So let me rely on my notes a little bit so I don't mess up. So the sun beats down upon the earth about 400 million horsepower of energy every day. 400 million horsepowers. And so God made these plants that they take in that sun, and as they take in that sun, that's called photosynthesis. I always liked that word in science, didn't know much about what it meant, but I just like the word. Photosynthesis, and what that is the process of these plants taking in this light, and as they take in that light, it creates food for them. And they're able to create their food, and that's the process of all these other words here of the chloroplasts and the laminae, I think is how you say it, and the thicold. So what happens, let me see if I can draw a little bit. I need to get Buster to draw for me. We'll just make that the sacroplast. So that's a sacroplast, and then it has within it, you know, an outer cell and an inner cell. And then here they have these, and I'm drawing it very small, you have these lamellibs in them, and they are stacked like coins inside. And then they have, there's terms for this too, they have these little sides to them. Let me show you what one looks like. I meant to bring it down here. Forgive me for just a minute. They're shaped like this. They're about battery size inside that plant. Now they're smaller, but that's the shape they take. So you get an idea. Here's the amazing part. So that plant is taking in life. And of course, we have to have plants to have oxygen, right? The plants provide the oxygen. So that helps us live, and we breathe off, and the sun gives, and it gives plants life in return. But here's the amazing thing that fascinated me about this is that when the sun is real bright and shining bright and giving a lot of sun, these things here, they will turn themselves away from the sun. And they will be just like they'll show you the edge of the battery. So all these things go, okay, we need to turn. We're getting too much sun. So we'll turn. And then what happens when the clouds come and cover up the sun? Then they will lay themselves up flat. On a cloudy day, they'll lay themselves flat so they can take in more sun. Chlorophyll is inside that plant. And it isn't outside it. How did it get in? If it's this, how did it ever get in there if it wasn't ever out? God just makes these things. And I get, every time I look up one, the quail, the mole, and the plant tonight. Before it was the kangaroo and the possum. The Malay, that bird that puts its beak in the sand and keeps the temperature at 92 degrees so the eggs can be born. What do we do? How much evidence does it take? And that's not all. There's hundreds of other examples. I'm going to keep giving them to you till I wear it out, I guess. I'll never get done. I'll never find enough examples. But it seems to me like if you come up with example after example after example after example, I've given you at least 9, 10, you come to the point of going, well, that just cannot be coincidence. The brain didn't do that. Science didn't do that. Where did it come from? And he made all things. So he made the mole. Thank you, God, for moles. Have you prayed lately for that? Have you thanked God lately for? Thank you, God, for moles. Yeah. Maybe you should. Maybe you ought to put that on your prayer list of things to be praying for.